My parents callously abandoned my grandmother, leaving her with nothing but 2 broken bags on my doorstep. 3 months later, a judge delivered a verdict that cost them far more than they could have ever imagined. Hello, Reddit. My name is Dorian. I'm a 35-year-old man, and my day began with the shocking discovery of my 75-year-old grandmother waiting outside my front gate, flanked by 2 shattered pieces of luggage and offering no explanation. I had a sinking feeling that something was terribly wrong. A quick review of my security camera footage confirmed my worst fears and made my blood boil with a righteous fury. Let's just say that my parents, aged 56 and 57, and my entitled golden boy brother, who is 31, were about to receive a harsh lesson on the real-world consequences of treating family like disposable trash. So that particular morning, I was jolted awake by my phone vibrating, so intensely it seemed like it was trying to escape the confines of my nightstand. I initially dismissed it as a spam call or another notification from one of those pointless group chats where my cousin provides a never-ending monologue. I didn't even bother to glance at the caller ID. I just slapped the screen and answered with a groggy, barely coherent, "Hello." That's when I heard the concerned voice of my neighbor, Bruce. "Dorian, I think your grandmother is sitting outside your gate." At first, the words didn't register. I blinked, trying to clear the sleep from my mind. "Wait, what? She's been there for about 20 minutes," he continued. "She has 2 bags with her. She's just sitting there on the curb." I shot upright in bed as if someone had just poured a bucket of ice water down my back. "Are you absolutely sure it's my grandma? I've seen her at your family barbecues. It's definitely her. She hasn't moved an inch." Without another word or even a goodbye, I hung up and vaulted out of bed. My wife, Nancy, stirred awake as she saw me frantically rummaging through the closet to grab a hoodie. "What in the world is going on?" she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. I was already at the door, pulling on my shoes. "My grandmother is outside, sitting on the ground." That statement snapped her to full alertness instantly. She was right behind me as we hurried to the front of the house. We opened the door, and there she was. Grandma Isalda, sitting on the frigid concrete at 5:30 in the morning, looking as though she were waiting for a bus that was never going to arrive. 2 battered old suitcases sat beside her like loyal, broken sentinels. One had a single folded piece of paper tucked into the loop of its handle. She wasn't crying or making a sound. She was just staring at the ground, her expression vacant, as if she had no idea where she was. Her face was pale, and her hands were shaking uncontrollably from the cold. She didn't even look up as we approached. I rushed over to her side. "Grandma, what on earth are you doing out here?" She offered no response. I reached down and touched her arm. It was as cold as a block of ice. Nancy was already opening the front door wider and turning up the thermostat inside. She helped me guide Grandma into the warmth of our home while I grabbed the luggage and the strange, folded note. Once inside, with the heat blasting, we wrapped Grandma in 2 thick blankets. She still hadn't spoken a single word. Nancy sat beside her on the couch, gently rubbing her back as I unfolded the note. The message was chillingly brief. It simply stated, "We figured this was for the best. Please understand." There were no names, no further explanation, just those cold, dismissive words. I stared at the paper, blinking as if that might somehow change the text. It didn't, and that's when the horrifying reality crashed down on me. My own parents had done this. My mother and father had dropped my 75-year-old grandmother outside my front gate as if she were a piece of unwanted furniture they were discarding. My hands trembled as I walked over to the surveillance monitor by the front door and pulled up the recording. I scrolled back to around 5:00 a.m., and there it was, clear as day. My father's SUV pulled up to the curb without its headlights on. He got out and opened the back door. My mother helped my grandmother out. They placed the suitcases next to her on the sidewalk, exchanged no words, and got back into the car. They drove off as if they were simply running an early morning errand. There were no hugs, no final words, not even a knock on our door to let us know she was here. They were just gone. I felt a deep, slow burn ignite in my chest, a quiet but steady rage that I knew would fuel me through the entire day. I immediately tried calling my father, but the call went straight to voicemail. I called again, same result. I tried my mother's number and was met with her recorded greeting. I attempted to call both of them a dozen more times, pacing the length of our living room as if I were about to wear a trench in the hardwood floor. Meanwhile, Grandma had finally found her voice. It was raspy, sounding like she hadn't spoken for hours. "I'm so sorry to show up like this, Dorian. I didn't mean to be a bother to you, too. I nearly dropped the phone." "No, Grandma, don't you ever say that. You are never a bother to anyone." Nancy leaned in closer, nodding in emphatic agreement. "You're always welcome here." I asked, "Why didn't you knock? Why didn't you call us?" She looked down at her hands, which were still trembling slightly. "I didn't want to wake anybody up. I figured someone would come out eventually." I sat down across from her, forcing my voice to remain calm. "Did they tell you why they were dropping you off?" She paused for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Last night, your dad packed my things. He said Cale and his girlfriend were moving in and the house was going to be too crowded. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's it. No warning, no discussion, no plan." She just shook her head. "He said it wouldn't be forever, just until they got settled in. And they just left you out there in the freezing cold." There was no verbal response. She just looked away again, not crying, but shrouded in a dead, heavy silence. The next morning, we all sat down for breakfast together, or at least we tried to. Grandma just sat there, clutching her mug of tea as if it were a lifeline. After Nancy took our daughter, Aria, to school, I told Grandma directly, "We're going over there today. I'm going to get some answers." She looked uneasy at first, but eventually gave a small nod. "Okay, but I don't want any fighting." Too late for that, I thought. I called in to work and took the day off. Nancy did the same. We helped Grandma into the car and began the drive to my parents' house. As we pulled into their neighborhood, I could feel the tension climbing up my spine like a venomous spider. There was a white moving truck parked outside their house, and my brother, Cale, was standing next to it, laughing about something with one of the movers. The rage that had been building all morning started to boil over. I parked further down the street, not because I had to, but because I didn't trust myself to pull into their driveway without ramming someone's bumper. We approached the house slowly. Cale was the first one to spot us. His smirk vanished instantly when he saw Grandma walking with us. Alara, his girlfriend, was standing on the porch, and her face fell as if she had just been caught cheating on a test in church. Neither of them said a word as we walked up. We exchanged only awkward, half-hearted nods, as if we were complete strangers instead of family. My parents were inside, sitting in the living room as if it were just another ordinary day. I didn't even bother with a hello. You dumped her at my gate like she was a bag of garbage. My dad looked up at me, his face a mask of indifference, the same blank expression he used to give me when I forgot to mow the lawn. "She's staying with you now, isn't she?" "So what's the problem?" My jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. The problem, I yelled, my voice echoing in the suddenly silent house, is that you left her outside in the freezing cold at 5:30 in the damn morning. My mom set her coffee mug down with a theatrical sigh. Dorian, we're not going to do this. We didn't have a choice. No choice. I shot a glare at Cale. You couldn't have stayed in a hotel, an Airbnb, or rented a cheap apartment for a few weeks. Cale just shrugged as if the answer were obvious. Why would I waste money on rent when we can stay here for free? It's family, after all. Yeah, I shot back. Family? Is that what this is about? My mom leaned forward, speaking quickly and condescendingly, as if she were explaining a complex spreadsheet to a toddler. Cale and Alara just had their baby. Dorian, you know how stressful that is. They needed stability. The house was just getting too crowded. Your grandmother, she's just a lot to handle these days. Nancy blinked in disbelief. A lot to handle. My mom waved her hands in a dismissive circle. The noise. The TV is always too loud. She forgets things. She's always leaving the stove on. We were starting to worry about it being a fire hazard. Honestly, we were doing her a favor. You have more space anyway. I was speechless for a second. You think abandoning your own mother in the dark and cold is a favor. My dad finally spoke up. We're not going to stand here and be judged by you for making a difficult decision. It's not like we threw her out on the street. She's with you now. You didn't even have the decency to knock on the door, Nancy interjected. Alara finally spoke, her voice soft as if she were trying to avoid any blame. We told them not to do it that way. I wanted to call first, but they insisted you'd understand. I turned my attention back to Cale. You just stood there and let this happen. He crossed his arms defensively. Look, man, you're being overly dramatic. She wasn't happy at the house anyway. She complains about everything constantly. She's stuck in the past. Everything is about how things were back when your grandfather was alive. This is how I used to cook this. Okay, we get it. I looked at him as if he were a stranger. She gave up her own retirement savings to help raise us. She paid your college tuition deposit when Dad insisted he couldn't afford it. Grandma's hands tightened around her purse for a brief moment. She didn't say anything, but her eyes dropped to the floor as if she was replaying that very memory. This was the same woman he used to hug after dinner and beg to sit in the front row for every single one of his school plays. Now he saw her as nothing more than an inconvenient piece of furniture, and not even the good kind, just the kind you dump on the curb when you need more space. Cale rolled his eyes and I continued, and a thank you would have been nice. That doesn't mean she gets to run the house now. She was making Alara uncomfortable. Alara tensed up but didn't dispute his claim. Grandma still said nothing. She just stood there, a silent observer in a conversation about her own life. That settled it for me. You all make me sick. My dad stood up, his posture threatening. Watch your mouth, son. Nancy stepped between us. You watch your own. You abandoned your mother like a bag of old clothes the second your golden boy showed up needing a free place to stay. My mom stood with her arms folded. We did what was best for everyone. No, I shot back. You did what was easiest for you. The air in the room grew thick and heavy, as if no one wanted to be the first to blink. Cale looked bored, as if he was already over the whole confrontation. Are you done now? We have stuff to unload from the truck. I took a step toward him without even thinking. You don't get to act like this is normal. You don't get to play the victim because you had to give up your man cave for a few weeks. He shrugged again. Look, you're taking care of her now. It all worked out. I don't see what the big deal is. Grandma's voice cut through the tension. It was quiet, but it sliced through the room like a surgeon's scalpel. I didn't want to be a burden. I immediately turned toward her. "You are not a burden. Don't ever say that." My mom sighed dramatically, as if she were the one exhausted by all of this. We didn't want to hurt her feelings, but sometimes you just outgrow things, people. I think that was the line that finally broke Nancy's composure. She walked right up to my parents and stated coldly, "You outgrew your own mother." My dad snapped, "Get out of my house right now or I'm calling the cops." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. "What are you going to tell them? That you kicked your elderly mother out into the freezing cold?" He just pointed a trembling finger at the door. "Out!" Nancy gently took my grandmother's arm. "Let's go, we don't belong here." We moved toward the door. None of them moved to stop us. There was no apology, no glimmer of shame. As I opened the front door, my mom yelled after me, "Don't you dare turn this into some moral crusade, Dorian. She's your responsibility now." I didn't look back. I just said, "Gladly." We walked away without another word. Outside, the moving truck beeped as it backed up the driveway, its routine noise a stark contrast to the emotional chaos inside. As I helped Grandma into the car, I glanced back at the house I grew up in. It didn't feel like home anymore. It just looked like four walls and a roof sheltering greedy, heartless people. I opened the door for my grandmother. She moved slowly, as if her bones were carrying a weight that could never be fully released again. Nancy helped her with her seat belt, and I stood there for a moment just staring at the house. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't even angry in the usual hot-headed way. I was just clear. We drove away in silence. Cale didn't come out. My father didn't storm down the driveway. My mother didn't shout one last guilt-ridden parting shot. They just let us go, as if we were nothing. It was strangely quiet in the car the entire way back. It wasn't until I had parked in our driveway and shut off the engine that I spoke. "I'm filing a report." Grandma blinked. "You're what?" "I'm not letting this go. What they did was illegal." She shook her head slowly. "Dorian, we don't need to make more trouble." I looked her straight in the eyes. "They made you into the trouble. I'm just making sure there are consequences." Nancy was already nodding. "I'll drive you down to the station myself." "Let's go this afternoon." Grandma sighed and looked out the window. "It will just make things worse. They'll accuse me of turning the family against each other." I shrugged. "Let them. If they were so concerned about family, they wouldn't have dumped you on a concrete sidewalk before sunrise." We helped Grandma inside, made sure she had some lunch and had taken her medications, and then got her settled on the couch with Aria. They were already falling into a comfortable rhythm. Aria was asking her questions like, "Did you have television when you were a kid?" And Grandma was laughing as if the morning's trauma hadn't happened. Before we left, while I was getting my keys, Nancy sat with Grandma. That's when she whispered it, so quietly it was almost inaudible, as if she wasn't sure she wanted to say it out loud. "You know, I let them think I was slipping. It made everything quieter." I stopped in my tracks. "They said I was forgetful, that I left the stove on. I didn't. But I pretended to forget a few things. It stopped them from asking me for more. I wasn't sure whether to be impressed or heartbroken. Maybe it was a bit of both." Nancy and I got back in the car and headed to the police station. It wasn't a long drive, maybe 20 minutes, but it felt like hours with everything churning in my mind. I wasn't doing this just to prove a point. I was doing it because I couldn't unsee what I saw on that security footage that morning. I couldn't escape the fact that those people were the ones who had raised me. We walked into the police station. The air smelled of old coffee and floor polish. A man at the front desk asked what we needed. "I need to file a report for elder abandonment," I stated, my voice clear and steady. That got his attention. He stood up and grabbed a clipboard. "Are you the primary caregiver?" "I am now." He led us to a small side office. About 10 minutes later, a detective named Corvin came in. He was in his mid-50s, with graying temples and a look that suggested he didn't trust anything until it was proven twice. He sat down and looked me dead in the eye. "Tell me exactly what happened." I didn't ramble. I laid it all out step by step. The 5:30 a.m. drop-off, the security footage from my home camera, the note tucked into my grandma's suitcase, her age, her physical condition, the financial contributions she had made to her son, my father. Their refusal to even ring the doorbell and their threats when we confronted them. Nancy backed me up with specific times and quotes of what my grandma had told us. I showed him the text history, my 20-plus unanswered calls to both of my parents. I even included Cale's smug texts that hinted they were finally going to get some peace and quiet. Corvin wrote everything down meticulously. Then he looked at me. "Do you have the security footage with you?" I had brought a copy on a USB drive. I slid it across the desk to him. "Good," he said. "This isn't just abandonment. This is starting to look like long-term financial exploitation." I raised an eyebrow. "Go on." He leaned forward. "If she's been giving them her benefits and they still evicted her, especially without a formal care plan, any notice, or a legitimate emergency, this isn't just immoral, it's illegal." Corvin paused and then made a call to Adult Protective Services, or APS. We waited for about 25 minutes before a woman named Astrid arrived. She was in her late 30s with piercing eyes and a no-nonsense energy. She introduced herself and sat down with us to go over the report. Her entire demeanor changed when she heard the details of how they had abandoned my grandmother. "This is extremely serious," she explained. "The exposure to the cold alone could have landed her in the hospital. You're saying they made zero arrangements?" "None," I replied. "Not even a phone call." Astrid looked at Detective Corvin. "We need to conduct a wellness check at the residence she came from. If the other parties refuse to cooperate, we will escalate this very quickly." I signed the necessary paperwork and provided them with Grandma's doctor's contact information and her medical history. Astrid scheduled a visit to our home for the following week. "We'll need to confirm that she is in a safe and stable environment. Based on the footage and the circumstances you've described, we will likely be seeking a court summons." Before we left, Corvin looked at me again. He said that most people don't report these things. It's easy to just stay angry and silent. "You're doing the right thing." I nodded. That's what I intended to do. Back in the car, Nancy managed a small smile. "You know what? I think you actually scared him." I laughed. "Good." When we got home, Grandma was napping in the recliner. Aria had drawn a picture of a cat and taped it to the wall above her head. I stood there for a moment, just watching them. I didn't feel like the kid who had grown up in that old house anymore. I felt like the man who was building a new one. That night, I blocked both my parents' and Cale's numbers from my phone. It wasn't because I was running away, but because I was refusing to let them barge back in and pretend to care. This wasn't a timeout. It was a permanent lockout. The next morning, I got a call from a restricted number. I ignored it. It rang again 5 seconds later. Then, a text came through from a new number. "You're really going to take this to court over one decision. You are destroying this family." It was from Cale. I didn't reply. I just took a screenshot and saved it to the evidence file. 5 minutes later, another one arrived. We didn't do anything wrong. You're going to regret this. That one did get a reply. I typed back, you'll regret underestimating me. I blocked that number too. By that point, I wasn't even angry anymore, just morbidly amused. It was as if they genuinely believed that texting, "You'll regret this," would make me sprint to the courthouse and beg them to take Grandma back. I guess when you spend your entire life believing you're the center of the universe, consequences feel like a personal betrayal. Anyway, I had moved on. The week passed by in a blur. Grandma settled into our home as if she had always lived there. Aria started calling her roommate Isalda, which made her laugh for the first time in what felt like weeks. Nancy bought her a heated blanket, and I ordered one of those massaging recliner chairs from Amazon. It wasn't about lavishing her with gifts, but about providing her with the basic comfort and dignity she had been denied. Astrid from APS came by midweek. She toured the house, asked Grandma a few gentle questions, and made sure she was safe, clean, and not sleeping on an air mattress in the garage. She looked almost relieved when she left. "I've seen too many of these cases go the other way," she said. "I'm glad she ended up somewhere decent." That Friday, the email arrived. A preliminary hearing had been scheduled. The charges: elder neglect, abandonment, and financial malfeasance. Location: County Courthouse. Date: Tuesday, 9:00 a.m. I didn't need to prepare. I had been preparing for this since the moment they decided to make her someone else's problem. Tuesday morning arrived, and I walked into the courtroom feeling as calm as if I were checking in for a doctor's appointment. Nancy was by my side, a steady presence as always. Grandma held my arm, not for support, but as a sign of unity, because she wanted to walk in with me. Across the room, my parents and Cale were sitting in a tight, miserable row, looking like they were auditioning for a low-budget remake of a family dysfunction movie. My mother looked like she hadn't slept in a week. My father looked resentful. Cale just looked annoyed to be there. He probably assumed this would all be over with a slap on the wrist and a dramatic speech about the unbreakable bonds of family. He was wrong. The judge strode in, an older man with steel-gray hair and an expression that made it clear he didn't tolerate fools or long-winded attorneys. He introduced himself as Judge R. Kenley and got straight to the point. "Mr. Dorian Bennett," he said, peering over his glasses. "You are the complainant. Please state your case." I stood up and laid it out, cool and clear, with no dramatics. My parents dropped off my grandmother at my residence. They did not call or ring the doorbell. They left her with 2 bags and a folded note. The temperature that morning was 38 degrees. I handed the clerk the printed photo of the note and then the USB drive with the video clip. The footage will show them driving away without a word. She sat alone for 45 minutes before I discovered her. They made no attempt to follow up. They did not answer 21 of my phone calls. I also have confirmation that for the past 3 years, she has given them over $1,200 per month from her Social Security and pension to help them pay their bills. The judge nodded slowly. "Do they hold power of attorney over her finances?" "No, sir." "Was there any formal notice given before she was removed from her home?" "None, just a note." I sat down. Then it was their turn. My mother stood up as if she were about to present her doctoral thesis on advanced victimhood. She opened her mouth and immediately started weeping, right on cue. We just wanted what was best for Isolde. She was becoming difficult. She would argue about everything. The television was too loud. She was forgetting things. Alara was overwhelmed with the new baby. The judge cut her off mid-sentence. I didn't ask you about Alara. I asked if you provided legal notice, sought a medical consultation, or filed for alternative housing before evicting a senior citizen from your residence. My dad stood up as if his stern tone could fix everything. With all due respect, Judge, we weren't evicting her. We were relocating her to a more appropriate home with another family member. I leaned over to Nancy and whispered, "Did he just say appropriate like she's a broken vacuum cleaner?" The judge heard me, and a small smirk played on his lips before his gaze returned to my father. "You left your 75-year-old mother on a sidewalk before dawn. You did not relocate her. You abandoned her." That single word silenced them completely. Cale remained seated. He didn't say a word the entire time, which was probably for the best. His brain cell budget for the day had likely been maxed out. Then came the moment that none of them expected, the financial evaluation. APS had conducted a thorough review of my grandmother's bank deposits and withdrawals. The monthly assistance she had been providing them wasn't so voluntary after all. Every month, transfers from her account were made on the exact same day. Most of the transactions were labeled as assistance or simply Cale. There were 0 receipts, no repayment plan, and no accountability whatsoever. Judge Kenley looked up from the report as if someone had just spat in his coffee. "You've been siphoning this woman's limited income for over 30 months, and when she was no longer of use to you, you discarded her." He sat back and folded his hands. "The defendants are found guilty of elder abandonment and financial malfeasance." There were no gasps, no dramatic screams. My parents just seemed to sink into their chairs, as if they were pieces of furniture that couldn't be returned. The sentence was swift. A $3,000 fine, 12 months of probation, no travel outside the county without clearance, and a court-mandated course on financial ethics. Grandma was awarded permanent primary residency status at my home, with restraining orders pending her decision. Cale was not mentioned in the charges. He wasn't a legal guardian, just a freeloader with a weak spine and no legal standing. But something told me that karma had him penciled in for a later appointment, most likely in Sharpie. That's when my father finally cracked. He shot to his feet, his voice loud and cracking. "You're not my mother. No real mother would let her own son get dragged into court like this." The judge banged his gavel once. Hard. "Silence, sit down," but he didn't. He pointed a shaking finger at Grandma as if she had violated some unspoken pact. "You raised a manipulator," he spat. "You raised a snake." Grandma stood up. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just looked him dead in the eye and said, "I raised the man who is standing next to me. You raised yourself into a corner." The judge nodded as if that were the true final ruling. Court was adjourned. We walked out without looking back. Cale kept his eyes on the floor the entire time. My mom was still dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. My dad was frozen in place, as if he couldn't process the fact that his self-proclaimed status as patriarch meant nothing in the eyes of the law. In the parking lot, Nancy squeezed my hand. Grandma let out the longest, deepest exhale I had ever heard from her. "You okay?" I asked. She looked at me with a steady gaze. "I'm more than okay, Dorian. I'm free." And for the first time, I truly believed her. We drove home from the courthouse in a comfortable silence. No music, no small talk, just the sound of the tires on the road, and a sense of calm satisfaction. Grandma didn't say much. She sat in the back, looking out the window as if she had finally reached her true destination. That evening, I ordered dinner in. Grandma went to her room early, saying she needed to think, which likely meant sitting quietly by the window, a habit she had when something important was on her mind. The next evening, she called Nancy and me into the living room. We sat down on the couch. She reached under a cushion and pulled out a large manila envelope. There was no dramatic build-up, no grand speech. I didn't tell anyone about this because I wanted to see how they would act when they thought I had nothing. I opened the envelope. Inside were legal documents, property deeds, financial summaries, and asset records. She owned a plot of land in Santa Cruz, a significant stake from an old restaurant partnership, and assets I never even knew existed. The total net worth was a staggering $5.1 million, all in her name and all completely unencumbered. Nancy sat bolt upright. I just blinked at the numbers. Grandma explained calmly I sold the acreage my sister left me years ago. I worked at that restaurant, I owned part of it. A silent partnership. I never told your father. He would have sucked it dry in a year. All of this is under my maiden name, she added, almost as an afterthought. I kept the paperwork out of the house and used a P.O. box and a separate bank. Your father never had a clue. She said it all as if she were reciting the weather forecast. No drama, just facts. Then she handed over another set of documents. I remember you two joking about opening a little resort on the coast, somewhere quiet. You are now the legal owner of a coastal property in Monterey. The facility is small, 50 rooms and a spa. It's yours if you want it. Nancy stared at the papers, her eyes wide. This is real. Realer than the people I raised, Grandma replied flatly. We didn't celebrate or cry. We just sat there absorbing it all. Not just the gift itself, but the meaning behind it. She had waited, watched, and taken meticulous mental notes before rewarding what she had observed. I don't want praise, she explained. I just want some peace, and I want to know my money isn't going to people who would trade me for a spare bedroom. I finally cracked a smile. You're safe here, and we'll handle this gift the same way you handled your life. Calm and smart. We didn't quit our jobs. We didn't make any grand announcements. We waited. That weekend, Nancy and I drove down to Monterey by ourselves. The place was real, clean, and peaceful, run by a retired couple who had been managing it for years, assuming it would eventually be sold off and turned into condos. When we told them we were the new owners, they didn't ask about money. They asked if we planned to keep the garden and the reading nook. We stayed for 2 days, taking notes and asking questions. On the entire drive back, we didn't talk about quitting our jobs. We talked about how to make it work without throwing our entire lives into chaos. Nancy said, we'll give it time. We'll see if this is a better fit instead of just blowing up our current life. Exactly, I replied. We'll run it like Grandma ran her finances. Quiet, steady, no handouts, and no noise. We didn't tell anyone for a week. Then on Thursday, a distant cousin who followed Nancy on Instagram commented on a photo from our Monterey trip. Congrats on the new place. That was the leak. The following Saturday morning, our doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. It was my mother holding a freshly baked pie. Standing behind her were my father and Cale, all of them dressed as if they were attending a church service. Cale was even wearing slacks. Slacks. Hi, sweetheart, my mom said when I opened the door, her voice sickeningly sweet as if nothing had ever happened. We've been thinking about you, Isolde. Nancy stood behind me, a silent wall of support. Grandma stood at the end of the hallway, her arms folded across her chest. Can we come in? Mom asked, smiling so hard it looked painful. We just want to reconnect. Reconnect, I asked, my voice flat. My dad jumped in. It's been too long. We miss our family. Things were tight before. Everyone said things they regretted. Cale held up a photo album. We brought pictures. We thought Grandma might want to see the baby again. Right. The same baby who was supposedly allergic to elderly people just last month. Grandma stepped forward, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled, a slow, sharp smile that didn't reach her eyes. You didn't care if I was cold on a sidewalk, she said, her voice steady. But now that I have something you want to reconnect. Nobody said a word. She nodded to herself. You can keep the pie, but this door is staying closed. I shut it firmly. A clean click. No slam, just finished. That Monday morning, I filed the paperwork for a full, household-wide restraining order. Grandma didn't ask for it, I just did it. There was no hesitation, no dramatic pause. I went to the courthouse, signed the document in blue ink, and filed it. My name, Nancy's, Aria's, and Grandma's, every name that mattered. No warning texts, no long explanations. Let them find out the same way Grandma did when she found herself sitting on a sidewalk without any notice. Later that afternoon, we got the confirmation. Approved. The sheriff's office would serve the notice in person. No contact, no lurking, and no surprise visits claiming to drop off food or some long-lost sentimental item. It wasn't about revenge. It was about control. Our house, our peace, our rules. 2 days later, the doorbell rang again. This time, it wasn't them. It was Alara standing on the porch alone, holding the baby. She had no bags, no stroller, just tired eyes and a tight grip on her child, as if she hadn't slept in days. Nancy opened the door without a word. I stood beside her. I'm not here to beg, Alara said quickly. I'm not here for money. Grandma appeared behind us, leaning slightly on the doorframe. I just wanted to apologize, she whispered, her eyes meeting my grandmother's. She didn't put on a show or pretend to cry. She just stood there, a baby on her hip and regret etched on her face. When they kicked you out, I didn't say anything. I was scared. I should have said something. I'm sorry. Grandma didn't move right away. She just stood there studying her as if she were trying to read the fine print on a contract. Then she spoke, her voice calm but sharp. And if I had frozen to death out there that morning, she asked, would you have still been silent? Alara swallowed hard and answered honestly, I don't know, but I would have never forgiven myself. Grandma gave a single, curt nod. That was it. No hug, no smile, just an acknowledgement of the truth. You don't have to forgive me, Alara added. I just needed to say it out loud. She turned to leave. Wait, Grandma said. Alara froze. Are you still with Cale? No, after he blamed me for losing out on the fortune. He snapped and punched a hole through the wall. I took the baby and left. I don't want anything from any of them. Grandma didn't reply immediately. She just looked at the infant. Do you have enough diapers and formula? Alara answered, we're managing. I'm working part-time at a clinic near my mother's house. Leave your phone number with Dorian. If the baby ever needs something essential, it will be taken care of. For her, not for you. I'll help, but don't come here again. It's not out of disrespect. I just need to keep things clean. Alara nodded, left her number on a sticky note I handed her, and walked away without looking back. We closed the door. Nancy looked at me. Are you okay with that? Grandma answered for me. She did better than I expected. She didn't lie to my face. That's already more than I can say for most of them. Later that night, out of morbid curiosity, I browsed social media. A huge mistake. Cale had posted a passive-aggressive rant about snakes in the family and how money changes people. Very subtle. His comment section was a mix of misguided sympathy and confusion. A few distant cousins chimed in with comments like, "Didn't she raise you?" And "This ain't it, Chief." A day after that post, my mother called from a new number. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail that started with, "Dorian, please," and ended with, "Oh, we're still your parents." I didn't bother listening to the middle. That Friday, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakably my father's. It was a real piece of work, 3 pages, front and back. It alternated between guilt trips, phony self-reflection, and one truly memorable line. "If Isolde is going to leave a legacy, don't you think it should be shared fairly?" That was the nail in the coffin. I scanned it, uploaded it to the court file for the restraining order, and then handed it to Grandma. She read that line, set the pages down, and said, "They still think I owe them something." Then she picked up her phone, dialed our attorney, and spoke 9 simple words. "Let's finalize the papers. I'm ready to sign everything over." That afternoon, she had a notary come to the house. She officially revised her entire will. I was named the sole beneficiary. Nancy was mentioned by name as my partner, and a substantial trust was set up for Aria's education. A separate, monitored fund was created for Alara's infant, with monthly disbursements and no parental access. My parents and Cale were erased completely. She even added a specific clause. If anyone dared to contest the will, their potential portion would be immediately donated to a local animal shelter. It was clean, sharp, and final. 2 weeks passed. No more knocking, no more phony pies, just silence. Then the paper trail started. First, we got word that Cale was trying to challenge Grandma's mental competency through some shady lawyer. We submitted the APS documentation, the court testimony, her doctor's notes, and the freshly notarized will. The case was thrown out in 5 days. Then came the insincere apology letters, long paragraphs from my mother about mending the scars and not letting bitterness dictate our final years. She even included a line about reconciling as a family over lunch, perhaps in Monterey. I didn't even show that one to Grandma. I shredded it the moment I read that line. She was never interested in a reunion. She wanted closure, and now she had it. At night, she'd sit out back on the porch swing with Aria. They wouldn't say much, just sit together and watch the sky grow dark. She never bragged. She didn't gloat with vengeful satisfaction. She just seemed steady, as if she had finally stopped checking the locks on the doors because she knew for certain that no one was coming in uninvited anymore. That weekend, I printed a new sign for our front gate. It read, "No soliciting, no apologies, no access." Grandma saw it, chuckled once, and said, "Might as well hang it in gold." I smiled back. "Don't tempt me." The following week, word trickled down that Cale had moved back in with my parents, but it was short-lived. 2 months later, he was kicked out. Apparently, he had racked up a mountain of credit card debt trying to impress a new fiancée and had demanded money from their joint account. When they told him no, he lost it. Yelling, a smashed lamp, a dented cabinet. They called the cops on him, not to press charges, but to try and scare him. It didn't work. He left that night and hasn't been back since. Alara kept her word. She never asked for anything and never showed up uninvited. The monthly trust for the baby went into effect without a hitch. We saw the reports. Formula, doctor's visits, daycare, nothing suspicious. My parents moved 2 towns over. A quiet neighborhood, a lower profile. I heard they tried to rejoin their local community church, but it didn't last. People remembered the court case. Word travels fast in small towns. No one forgot what they did. My mom stopped posting on social media. My dad withdrew from every social club he used to brag about. They tried to host a family reunion once, but only 3 people showed up, and none of them stayed for long. They are, for all intents and purposes, isolated. We didn't destroy them. They did it to themselves. They made their choices, and for once, those choices actually caught up with them. Grandma is still with us. She still wakes up early, makes pancakes that are a little too thin and coffee that's a little too strong. She never brings up the past. She doesn't have to. The life she lives now speaks for itself. Last week, she handed me a sealed envelope and said, "Open this when I'm gone, not a moment before." I just nodded and took it. No questions asked. The truth is, we don't need whatever is in that envelope. We already have everything that matters. Stability, peace, and a real family built on something more substantial than guilt and obligation. Family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes it's just about the people who show up when it counts. And my grandma, she showed up for us when no one else would. So we did the same for her. As for those who couldn't, well, that's something they'll have to live with every single day.